right. Good afternoon, everyone. All right. Thank you for turning out during your lunch hours, as well as for the external participants and taking your time initiative to come over uh, to here. So again, thanks for seeing to invite me again to come over here to give a talk. So I always have that, you know, good memories with Busa Libraries as well. And saying good to see all of you again. So I'm going to take about like 40 to 45 minutes to share with you what I think about this Trump's tariff with a couple of sessions. First, I'll talk about, give you a very quick overview of what has been going on in the past 2 months since the Liberation Day. And then I will take a quick review on the impact of this Trump's tariff so far on Malaysia as well as on the global economy. Then I guess most importantly, I'm going to look at how this Trump's tariff is going to change the world in the future. So that's why I changed the title to, instead of to have that Trump's tariff, but I put a title that is free trade as we know over. So that will be the third part that I hope to emphasize more because that would be even more controversial then. All right. So this is who I am. So I'm going to have more connection with Busa later on, right? It's because I'm going to be the chairman of the board of a going to be listed company then. So then, yeah, that will make me come back further. Now, so here, first one, very quick look on. I have 6 slides on what has been happening on this Trump's tariff. So the first 3 slides are about the tariffs on different countries. So the tariffs that we know about mostly are nations specific. For example, at the very beginning, you have these tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. And then later on, of course, during the Liberation Day, when that announcement, you have all these country specific discounted reciprocal tariffs, so to speak. All right. And then so those are the ones that we pay attention to. So I'm not going to go into that details, right? But if you do remember that what happened then will be the one that impact us the most will be, of course, the announcement during the 2nd of April, all right, with that 10% baseline tariff for everyone, including the island with, penguins. And then you have this discounted reciprocal tariff on different countries. So we were hit by 24%. But then that was supposed to go into effective on 5th of April, which it did. But then during the noontime of the same day, then it was being put into pause for 90 days. So you know all these stories. Now, so then what happened then within that 90 days of pause? So it basically became more, calm. Then you start to hear about so-called US-UK deal, and then you have that Geneva talk, and then the London talk between the US and the China to have that framework for negotiation. You also heard about that we have our delegates meeting with the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, and then US have 4 demands on us. So you heard about all these stories, but nothing go concrete so far. Even the US-UK, it is about just a framework. Even for the China, it's just about framework that they are going to have a deal to negotiate. But you never know what's going to be happening, after 9th of July. You even heard about the possibility that they may have further defer for that 18 countries being friendly to the United States, showing good faith in negotiation to extend that 90-day pause. But you never know whether it's going to be that or not. So that it's so far all these tariffs on specific countries. But later on, you will notice that all these tariffs on different countries, so far, they didn't really have that much of impact. What probably it will hit different countries most will be industry-specific tariffs. So then, for example, you have this industry-specific tariff. They are mostly initiated under 2 different sections, 232, that is for the national security threat purpose. Then you have section 301, that is because of unfair trade practices. So under these two main sessions, so you have all the investigation. You can notice that from steel and aluminum, and then to lumber and timber, even considered as a national security threat to the United States, automobile and parts. So then you move on. Then you even have the pharmaceutical and its imports investigated under this national security threat as well. Critical mineral and rare earth imports also investigated under Section 232. So all these industry-specific threats, they are still under investigation. So we do not know yet who are going to be impacted by this industry-specific tariff, by how much. So that will, in fact, hit us more if that really happens. Because if you look at the structure of our exports with the United States, you will notice that about 70% of our export to the United States, they can be lumped under just few categories. Machineries, which include E&Es, semiconductors, those machinery parts and components, and then you have this refined petroleum. So, and those are the stuff that, in fact, has already accounted for 70% of the trade. So if you have that specific, and all these different industries, pharmaceutical, E&E, refined petroleum, they are now under the exempted categories under this country-specific tariff. So that's why later on I will show you that you don't see much impact of this tariff, given all the hoo-ha stuff in the past 2 months, but you don't see much impact on our trade performance of this tariff. Part of the important reasons is because of the exemption on pharmaceutical, on semiconductor, on refined petroleums, which, like I said, accounted for about 70% of exports to the United States. So they are exempted. That's why you don't see much impact, a negative one on our exports. So you have all this stuff. Now, okay, let me go to the next one. So because of these tariffs, so then you probably have heard that the US average tariff against the world is now the highest in 100 years. So when I say highest, that means this is Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act 1930. Of course, is the one that people refer the most, which is here. Then the tariff, of course, is at this moment, the average tariff for United States, it's already higher than what it had been 100 years ago. You know why people care so much about this Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act? Because it was always associated with the Great Depression. So that's why people were so scared, when they with this kind of high tariff, that are we going to go back to that kind of Great Depression era? So even though if you look at the historical his tariff level of the United States, which during those, for example, after the Revolutionary War of the United States and during the Civil War of the United States, that means before 1861, so they have a tariff even as high as 60% because of especially this tariff for abominations in 1828. But then if you have any chance to read those documents of all those tariffs as high as 60% in the past, you will notice that the rhetoric that they used was so similar to the one that you heard from Trump. Trump said, "Make America great again." But if you look back to 1828, for example, they make exactly the same reasons. All right, so about how to protect the domestic manufacturers, how to protect their domestic jobs. They should put their country first before another countries. Exactly the same rhetoric, even though you talk about things 100 years back. All right, but anyway, now, so that was what happened to United States tariff level so far. Then later on in the third part, I will pay more attention to this period. But you probably can pay attention a little bit first here. With this Reciprocal Trade Agreement Act 1934, which I'll mention a little bit about what it is later on, you will notice that the tariff for the United States has dropped basically to near to 0%. before the Trump's tariff was about like 1.2, 1.3% tariff against the world exports to the United States. So that was very low, of course. And this is a very important period for not just the United States, but for the rest of the world. Now, like I said, if you read the appendix of the announcement on 5th of April, as well as during the 9th of April, then you will notice there are two important exemptions that matter for the rest of the world. So the first exemption is because of this 20% of the US content in exports to the United States. So what is that? If you read that Appendix 3, then it will say that, so let me read it for you. The duty provided in the applicable subheading plus 10%. So that this 10% is the baseline tariff. Now with this tariff, it says that, all right, this tariff can be exempted for this, except for in heading 9903.10134. So when I look at this 34, it means those US content of the article provides at least 20% of the custom value of the imported article is provided. So which means as long as your exports to the United States with more than 20% US content, then you start to be exempted for whatever US contents in that value. So the rest then will be taxed. So more US content you have, then greater exemption you will get from your exports. So then you can start imagining what happened then. For example, let's say you are the furniture exporter to the United States. We know that 70% of our furniture exports they are destined for United States. Now, how do you get that exemption? Let's say, for example, you get your designed those specifications from your US buyers. So you mark up the value. So to make you eligible to get the exemption. So then you will know that more higher is the value of that US content, then more exemption you get, then less affected your export volume will be. All right. So then you will see that in terms of numbers, you don't see much decline in our exports numbers volume to the United States. But you will start to feel that at least for those manufacturers, their profit margin will be squeezed because you have a greater import value. That means you have a higher import content, higher import cost then. But given the same export value, then you will squeeze the profit margin. So those are the numbers you probably will not see in GDP and exports, but those are the things that will be felt on the ground. So that is the first exemption. Then the second exemption, of course, is all these different categories. 8541, 8542 are two most important categories for Malaysian exports to the United States, which include all those machinery stuff, E&E, like say semiconductor, and as well as those refined petroleum. So they fall into these two categories. So you take all these things into consideration, then you will notice that the damages, even before the numbers coming out, you can probably guess that the impact of this tariff, like I say, even though hoo-ha a lot, but the impact will tend to be minimal, negligible, at least so far. Now, so therefore then, 2 weeks ago, our trade exports statistics came out. Then it basically confirmed that that what do you call that guess. So then I come to the second part of my sharing about the damages so far. So this is the monthly trade performance of Malaysia overall. So this is the two latest statistics you can see. So our imports grew by 20%, and then our export grew by 16.4%. So you just by looking at the patterns of the growth rate, you will never know that big things happened in April. Because the growth performance is just exactly like the same as before. So this is why they say that even though the tariff has been there, but you don't see much impact yet. A lot of reason must be because, other than exemptions, like I said, it must be because that the firm so far, they absorbed all these costs. Okay. If you look at, so these are snapshots from the DOSIM's trade performance report. Yeah. So what is this about? Now, if you look at these two, what do you call this, web chart, the dark solid line refers to the recent April this year, and then the dotted line refers to April last year. So you notice that this refers to all our major trading partners. So you don't see much difference except for United States, Singapore, Indonesia to some extent. But then the interesting part, of course, is our exports to United States, have been reaching like 45.6% increment compared to what we did in the same month last year. So then people, of course, would guess this must be the front loading, because before what happened in July, 9th of July, so better we quickly, do as much exports as we can. So that could be the reason, front loading. And then, like I said, because of all the exemptions, it didn't hurt the export so much. It could be because the firms are now absorbing all the cost issues, all these squeeze in the profit margin, because they probably believe that these tariff issues are going to be short-lived. They're going to be like temporary, not a permanent one. So they are more willing to absorb the cost rather than passing through to the clients. All right, so that's so far on the impact. So I have made some calculations on, let's say, given whole year, we're going to have like 10%. It's not going away, but we don't have that 24%. So even with that, condition remain 10%. The exemption is still there, but we don't have this industry-specific tariff yet. Then at most, our export to United States, at most, you are going to see a reduction by about 3 to 3.6% drop in our exports to US. That was okay, is it? That is considered okay with that 3% drop, given all that 10% tariff, all the stuff. So with that, then I will presume that the impact of this tariff again on the trade, even though it sounds important, sounds critical, sounds serious, but the impact on our export to United States is not going to be severe. Okay. But then, so let's go to the third part. Then what will be the potential impact then, if not to the tariff itself? All right, so with that, the US investment community, for example, JP Morgan, the research released last month, 2-3 weeks ago. So even though they reduce the probability of recession, but still they have about 40% call for US recession. So if it's going to hurt the global economy, it will be the recession that hurts, because this is a macro impact on other exports as well, not just the tariff. So that is one possibility. But I believe that you certainly have realized another bigger potential impact is this selling America phenomenon. All right. So American securities, particularly treasuries, they are safe haven assets, right? They are the safest assets in the world. No matter what happened in the world, even though the problems originated in the United States, including the global financial crisis, as well as the COVID, capital always will flow back to United States for safety purpose. When they find, the world is just too dangerous. So the risk-off cycle always will result in what? Appreciation in the US dollars, because people just buy the US assets, and then you are going to see a drop in the US interest rates, so 10-year treasury interest rates. That is always what happened, at least since 1970s. Never an exemption. But then, what happened on the 9th of April, since then, will be something very much similar to what happened to the emerging markets. People start to even using sudden stop to describe what happened to the United States market. So what do you mean by this? Let's look at this. Now, this is an announcement when the discounted reciprocal tariff went into effect. So what happened since then? You look at this nominal broad dollar index, which shows the value of the US dollars against all her trading partners. So when the value goes down, it means US dollars depreciates against the world. And you notice that since then, even till today, the world has been so turbulent, so uncertain, and yet US market is no longer as safe as it used to be. So the US dollars didn't appreciate as it happened in 2018, 2019, as it happened during the COVID, as it happened during the global financial crisis in 2019, as it happened during the debt, European debt crisis in 2010, as it happened, every time when crisis happened. But this round, it kept depreciating. Even so, when you look at the treasury bonds rates, like I said, it's supposed to drop because people would tend to buy more treasury bonds, the US treasuries, 10-year treasuries, because again, it is the safest asset. So you know the impact. When you buy more US treasuries, the US treasury prices will go up, but then the bond yields will go down. You're supposed to see that. Again, you didn't see that here. What you observe is the keep rising of the bond yields. Even with the ongoing tension between the Israel and Iran, which could escalate into not only a regional world, but who knows? Given that situation, you have already oil prices shooting up from before the event, 13th of June. The oil prices actually was around like 65, 64 US dollars per barrel, but now it's like already 74, 75 US dollars per barrel. So you already have these oil prices shooting up. You're supposed to see US dollars appreciate. You're supposed to see US Treasury yields going down, but again, you didn't. You won't see that. What you observe at this moment, still dollars keep weakening, and then the Treasury bonds yields keep going up. So yeah, so what happened then? That, like I said, and why this is important, because you can easily imagine multiple reasons. US Treasuries as the most liquid assets is basically support the liquidity in the banking system. You have all these stable coins, in those crypto world, then using US Treasuries as their collateral as well. So what if you have run in the US Treasuries? Then that means people like sell the US Treasuries. It shake the value of this collateral, that it will have impact on the stable coins, will impact on the crypto prices, will have impact on the liquidity in the financial banking system. So that will be the most dangerous impact on the world economy. Not the tariff, not the export alone, probably not even the slowing down in the US economy, but what happened in the financial markets will be where the most dangerous impact lies in. Okay, so this is just about tariff. We haven't talked about the One Big Bill Act, that makes US debt to increase by trillions in the next 10 years. So that kind of stuff, so that will make the story even scarier. All right, so this is what I have mentioned. Okay, now let's go to the last part. Let me spend another 15 minutes to talk about this, and I will open up Q&A. So that will be more interesting. I want to listen to your stories, because I believe you're all the Trump supporters. That's why you are here. Or you are Trump haters, you are here. So I want to listen to your viewpoints then. So what is the bigger challenge ahead? Now, we live in American hegemonic world, at least since Second World War. So you know that. Now, how important is this American hegemonic world? Whether you like that American power or not, but you will notice the importance of that, so to speak, hegemonic stability. So let's look at these charts. I took the GDP per capita, a number that measures prosperity, since 1252, almost 1,000 years ago. So you look at a 1,000-year history, you look at how GDP per capita for US, UK, Malaysia, and China looks like. So what happened now, what you can observe very obviously, that prosperity You know, the world, the prosperity that we know, that happened somewhere after this 1945. Do you see that? Given the prosperity that we had, if you look back to all the prosperity of different civilizations of the past world, all these look like nothing compared to what we achieved today. The economy in the past 100 years, in the past almost 1,000 years, look like stagnant, look, again, like I said, nothing at all compared to what we achieved in the past 80 years. Now, if I zoom in this part, so this is where I zoom in. So again, you will notice that those prosperity, whether it's US, UK, those still like British Empire, Malaysia, China, for example, you notice that it almost stagnant. It didn't change much, but only after the Second World War, it started to show something different. For the US and UK, for example. Now, even for Malaysia, so it started to show that more rapid increase in the GDP per capita when we entering 1990s, isn't it? You look at the case of China, even though you see a prosperity stagnancy right here, and then you start to see again a rapid rise in the Chinese GDP per capita after 2000. So, because China entered World Trade Organization in 2001, November. So, that's how, now, so what conclusion can we make so far? This is the world that we, at least as far as I know, that we live in after 1945. All right, so you know what happened then. Because during the Second World War, so basically, whether you talk about Asia Pacific, whether you talk about the Europe, so they were destroyed basically by the Second World War. So the US was the only power during those times, economically untouched, military untouched in the sense that they remain powerful. So, and that's a time when modernization happened. Modernization happened in the sense that why do you think that so many Koreans, like for example, so many Taiwanese, so many Singaporeans, they graduated from United States? So because the US opened the door, whether in terms of technology transfer, whether in terms of education, whether in terms of the goods, manufacturing goods that you can export. So they opened the market, they opened the door. All right. So, and that's the modernization stories in 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. If you learn development economics, you will notice that. Then they have a thought that trade, if you look at, for example, the Atlantic Charter signed by Roosevelt and Churchill in 1941, August, then you will notice that trade openness has been a very important criteria for the post-war world. So then, because they believe that when you trade with others, you make friends, you don't make enemies. And then you have a lot of stuff like, for example, countries supposed to be transiting towards democracy, because in democracy, you have to respond to voters. So chances for you to engage in war tend to be minimized, that kind of thinking. So trade, democracy, modernization, they somehow link to each other. And that somehow seems to be the world that we live in since Second World War. Right? You may have a lot different regional war, but somehow you don't see that kind of large-scale war anymore since then. Now, plus a lot of stuff, right? When you say that kind of stability, also in terms of whether you have a reserve currency that serves as a liquidity to serve the global banking system, blah, blah, blah. So you have a lot of different criteria, which we can talk about that when during the Q&A. Now, here comes the questions. People keep asking these questions. Is American century over? Especially with the US invasion of Iraq in 2003. If 9/11 in 2001, so, okay, let's trace 10 years back. After the collapse of the Berlin Wall and then the collapse of the Soviet Union, So basically, you don't have that clash of ideology anymore. So the world basically belongs to capitalism. All right. So then that's why 1990s. For those like us old enough, you know what 1990s look like. Those were like everyone can get rich world. Everyone can get rich kind of 10 years. So but that and that so the US was the only power in that world. So we call that kind of world as a unipolar world because the only power, great power in the world is the United States. You don't have other great powers to compete with the United States anymore, right? But then that unipolar moment happened during the 9/11 where US still has that moral um, position to call for others to, be in line and then to what they call to take down the terrorism in Afghanistan. Can you imagine that Russia will respond to the call, China will respond to the call? So that many will say that was a unipolar moment for the United States. But then that moment is really a moment because it just disappeared. Once, 2 years later, US invaded Iraq with the wrong, non-existent reason, accusing Iraq with this the what do you call the weapon of mass destruction. So then, since then, of course, a lot of problems since US involved in this Iraq. The morality basically in the global leadership start to crack, and then a lot of things happen later on. So plus economically, the 2008 global financial crisis also was a time that people start to question about the American capitalism. So one of the very famous moments was when the governor of the People's Bank of China, Zhou Xiaochuan, at that moment, so then very famously, speak to the US counterparts in the global meeting, saying that we used to learn from you, but look at how you messed up with your global financial crisis. We think that we no longer have anything to learn from you. So that's why since then you have start to see the rise of China in a global arena. Of course, with when Xi Jinping became the leader in 2013 and onwards, so you see all the world start to look different. People again start asking about that questions. It's American century over, going to be replaced by Sino century, with China leading the global order. So, and especially when people look at the numbers, the share of US GDP in the world GDP keep dropping, whereas you see the rise in the importance of China GDP in the world GDP. But again, looking at this graph before I proceed, I should remind you also that, in fact, China is the biggest beneficiary of the global system that we know as today, the one led by America. Because you look at the share of China GDP, how it rise, it basically picked up after the entrance of WTO. So that's why a lot of people will say that China is very different from Russia, even though they are competitor to the US. Russia basically tried to change that global order, but China tried to lead that global order without changing it, probably tilting it towards its own style, but not to destroy it. But anyway, so now people again asking that question. So if you look at the survey on the percentage of people, showing, favorable towards United States or China. If we look at the statistics in the world, basically they still like US more than China, except for two countries. One of them is Malaysia. We have people liking China more than the US. So we talk a lot about moving toward multipolar world. So then, so that, of course, when we say moving toward multipolar world, meaning it is a world led by China. Now, let me come to the questions. If that is the case, number one, is China ready? If China is ready and willing to do so, is that global order, the world order as we used to know, since 1945 will still maintain, or the global order will be very different under Chinese leadership? Okay, so that's the two last questions that I want to address. First of all, but I put up my statement here. China is a very different hegemony. Let's look at this. Why I say it's very different hegemony. Remember, why US is the country with the largest trade deficit in the world? Because like I said, since 1945, they opened the market for the global manufacturing goods. So they are more like an absorber, the consumer for the global goods. All right. So in that sense, of course, it imports far more than exports. But China is the one standing in the opposite. They are the one selling to the world rather than absorbing the products from the world. They are the ones selling their products to the world. You look at this in 2015, the year before Trump was elected, before Brexit happened. So this blue color stands for China's trade surplus against the world. So I make a mistake here. This is supposed to be US-China bilateral trade deficit. It's not the US total trade deficit, yeah? So of Chinese total trade surplus, 62% can be accounted by the bilateral deficit between US and China. That means 62% of Chinese surplus were absorbed by the US market. You know the consequence, therefore. You talk a lot about China's shock. All these Chinese goods, so to speak, destroy their local employment, local jobs, because manufacturers or the FDI all moved to China, setting up factories there. So that's why you have all this stuff, Then almost 10 years later, last year, Chinese trade surplus reached $1 trillion, so the largest in human history. But then the US only absorbed about less than a third of the Chinese trade surplus. So where did the 2/3 go? It went to Global South. It was the developing countries, emerging markets, including Malaysia, that absorbed Chinese products. So in that sense, we are in a very different, and when you look at the speech of President Xi, for example, so he already have the ambitions to make China self-sufficient. He wants to make sure that China can control all the choke points in manufacturing so that they are not exposed to the fragility towards external disturbances. So he has that ambition. So therefore, the world that we are going to observe, if, for example, China is going to be the leader, will be the world where they are the one who can manufacture almost everything and then taking the world as their market. It's a completely different from the American or the American world that we live in. So, yeah, so let me give you, okay. So that's why I say, even if China, this is a slide that I'm just trying to argue that China is not yet ready to be that global order. Because, for example, to be global order, you must make sure that your currency is freely traded, but they are not. So, which means that you cannot easily buy renminbi assets as safe assets. You can't, right? Like, for example, the capital account, therefore, is restricted. You can send your money there, but very difficult for you to take money out from there. So that kind of stuff. So like I said, the global market is a market for Chinese exports rather than the other way around. So that's why I give you a sense. If you look at the trade structure of Malaysia with China, it is very asymmetric. What do you mean by this? Again, I look at the 70% of Malaysian total exports to China. You will notice that 70% of Malaysian export to China, they fall into just 6 different categories according to the HS code. What are them? Refined petroleum, crude petroleum, E&E, semiconductor, palm oil, and some machinery stuff, and metals. That's it. All right. But if you look at imports of Malaysia from China, that includes 89 of different sessions, including from cabbage, vegetables, to clothes, to tables, to this kind of equipments, all the way to even refined petroleum as well, E&E semiconductor. So then you will notice that, hey, when we talk about trade with China, we are talking two different stories. Who will take the market in China? Not the ordinary businessmen, exporters from SMEs, but they must be GLC, because only GLC will do palm oil exporting, crude oil exporting, right? As well as MNC, because they're the one who export under the global supply chain. That's it, full stop. The most story you probably heard about is what? We export durian, nanga, but that's just news, The numbers wise is just very small. But then the imports that we have, you basically encounter them every day. So that means you are going to see a lot of import competition facing our local producers, which they don't have any political bargaining power because they didn't sit next to PMX. They don't have the years of PMX because they're too small, right? They are not GLC, they're not MNC. So you see that kind of trade structure will have different, because of different participants, so they have a different impact. This is very different from the trade structure between US and Malaysia. For US and Malaysia, the trade structure, they are symmetrical. Symmetrical in the sense that whether import or exports, 70%, they fall into the same category. Those participants also by GLC, also by MNC. So that's why no matter how much you import from US, the ordinary people will not have any sense of like suffering because US SMEs, they don't compete with Malaysian SME. All right. So yeah, this is the last slides. So therefore, last one, is the free trade as we know over? So the free trade as we know, number one, zero tariff, low tariff. But is this over? Because the tariff in the past, when I say in the past means before 1945, the free trade that meant was not zero tariff. It was tariff against different countries, but then above that, beyond that tariff, everyone can trade freely. So that means just very much like what we have today. Above 10%, you can still export wherever you want, but still tariff will no longer be zero. Is that kind of free trade that we're going back? So that's number one. Number two, the free trade we talk about will be, like I said, if you think from the whole supply chain, so the US always occupied the customer's chain, being the end of the supply chain, and then all other countries participating along the line, from upstream to midstream, so on and so forth. So if we are going to change that world, which means what? That means US will be out from the supply chain. So who will occupy that end user chain? That's important because you probably heard prime ministers and others economists telling you that we should diversify. We should, like for example, emphasize on ASEAN market. Well, to some extent this is true, but imagine what kind of trade that we have in ASEAN right now. Our ASEAN is not occupying the end user supply chain. What we do, we compete among each other for the FDI, and then we produce, because we portray ourselves, this region as a production hub. So we are all embedded into this supply chain. We produce, and then we export to global external market, to Europe, to Japan, to the United States. So even if you try to trade more with ASEAN, but who is going to be, again, the one at the end user? Because they are the one who is going to buy our products. Even if you trade more with Indonesia, Singapore, but then those produced in Singapore, somehow they must find different markets to absorb their products as well. So again, where is that end user? If not the United States, is that going to be China? But I can show you, China is not playing that role at this moment. Europe among themselves occupying about 80% of their trade. That means they trade among themselves. So then they don't serve as the final market for our products. So if not US, if not China, if not United States, if not EU, who is going to be? So that will be a world that completely unknown to what we to all of us, in fact. All right. So then I will argue that probably it's time also for ASEAN to open up, or at least to synchronize those non-tariff barriers, regulatory framework, standards that segment, that separate different markets in this ASEAN. How to integrate this ASEAN market into something like whether you sell in Penang is exactly like you sell in Johor, that kind of stuff. So then only then we'll have a chance to really protect ourselves from the fragility in the external world. So last one, when you talk about multipolar world, so last line, when you talk about multipolar world, which again you heard a lot about, you probably like that because I don't think that people like American hegemony. But then multipolar world means what? You have a different regions with different powers. So in Asia, Asia Pacific, you're going to have China as a great power there. In Europe, Trump trying to make Putin to be the power, great power, controlling Europe. Then the US will be the hemisphere, West, So then you're going to have what? People say that great power politics, competition among great powers, it's coming back. When great powers politics is back, means you are going to see a more turbulent world. In the next 10 years, you will never know. So again, that will be the world that we are so unfamiliar with. Because the world that we are familiar with, it's the one that we used to live in 1970s, 80s, 90s, 2000. All right, so with that then, I will stop here and I want to listen to your points, your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. Any questions from the floor?
Thank you, Dr. That was a great speech. I would like to go back to the bonds and the stable coins and crypto. I think after the Nixon shock, we know the gold and currency are equal. So the currency goes up, the gold goes up. So that's the causality of it. But in my opinion, I thought crypto was more of a high risk, just another two-day penny. I don't see the intrinsic value of it. At least gold is bought by a central bank. But when you say the bonds were related to crypto, I just didn't get that. What's the causality? Why is the fluctuation of bonds will actually hurt crypto? I'm not a crypto expert. I wish it dies. But I want to know, why is that now suddenly there's a causality in the real economy and the crypto coin?
You must be losing a lot in crypto market. So that's why you hope that crypto will die. All right, now, so yeah, you are right to say that. I mean, you can always argue whether crypto has a value by itself. I mean, it certainly has a speculative value. Otherwise, given the price volatility. But exactly because of price volatility, you know that it won't have meaningful use in the real world, because you don't want your salaries denominated in crypto value. The morning when you receive your salary, the afternoon you go broke. You know what I mean? So because of the volatility, it won't be useful in our daily life, and we don't see any meaningful transactions using crypto so far. All right. Of course, given the issues of too slow the blockchain technology, it operates and the resources that it consumes, so on and so forth. So those are the stories that we can debate. But why bonds value will have association with the stable coin, with the crypto? So it is specific to that stable coins. Now, people trying to find an exception, what called the alternative. If we don't believe in the volatility in the crypto, because it grants crypto useless, irrelevant in the real market, then how about if we maintain that value of the crypto currencies, we make it stable. So by doing how? By doing something like a fixed exchange rate, that you fix your value of your crypto with the collateral that you keep. So that means that if it is a $1 worth of crypto, then you have $1 worth of treasuries behind. So with that, then the crypto becomes, it has value now. Like you said, crypto has no intrinsic value. Now it has, because you have that collateral, like I said, with proportional value with the cryptos. So that is called stablecoin. Now people seem to be crazy about stablecoin, but what's the logic of this stablecoin? It sounds exactly like a fixed exchange rate. You know what I mean? So you fix the value, let's say 3 ringgit 80 cents, ringgit for $1. How do you make that fixed? Because somehow trading happens every day. People buy and sell ringgit, buy and sell US dollars against ringgit. Then how do you make sure that the value is fixed? Only when you have sufficient enough foreign reserves to back up your fixed exchange rates. So now, if it is a time when many people want to buy your ringgit, that's okay, because ringgit is printed by Bank Negara. So then if a lot of people want to sell the US dollars buying ringgit, that's okay. Bank Negara just supply ringgit, keeping all those US dollars as reserve. So happy story. But what if it is a time where it is a situation where people just rush out from ringgit market? The investors just keep selling ringgit, getting back their US dollars. Then what Bank Negara, in order to preserve that value, so Bank Negara has to keep selling the US dollars, buying back the ringgit. But how many US dollars you can sell? Because you're not the one who printing US dollars. How much you can sell depends on how much you keep in the past as a reserves. It always has a limit. Now, that is what people also worried about stable coins. Because what if people, for example, worried about the value of the US treasuries because of the One Big Bill Act that erode the value of treasuries? People just don't believe in the value of treasury that support the stable coins. It used to be, $1 stable coins with $1 treasury bills as collateral. That's only when the value of the US treasuries maintain at that $1 value. But what if people, because of inflation, because of rising interest rates that cause the treasury bonds price to drop, because of the worry about the US debt sustainability, people want to what I call the run on, people worried about the value of treasuries, then worry in the sense that the one stable coins you hold will no longer worth the similar $1 value in the treasury, because the value of treasury has been, under the water. So then people will rush to sell their stable coins in order to get back their assets as early as possible. That's what you call bank run. But this is going to be a bank run of stable coin. So you create the kind of possibility that more people hold stable coins, more formal financial institutions holding stable coins, then the ripple effect of the US Treasury's issues will tend to spread all over the financial markets. If it is okay if stable coins didn't enter the formal financial system, which means the mutual funds that didn't hold stable coins, the private equities that didn't hold their liquidity in stable coins. If all these alternative financial institutions, if they were not absorbed into the mainstream financial system, that's still okay, because the impact somehow can be contained within that community. But it is not the case right now. Stablecoin, crypto has been formalized. It has been absorbed into the formal banking system. So whatever happened in stablecoins will have the ripple effect on the United States as well. You look at the case of Taiwan, when that selling America situation happened during the 9th of April, when the discounted reciprocal tariff went into effect. So then the Taiwanese yen, the new Taiwanese dollars keep appreciating, right? Because somehow it sounds like a Japanese yen and Germany and the Germany bonds. That sounds like a safe assets now. People just rush to all these markets. So then what happened then? Because the Taiwanese insurance markets, they hold a lot of US assets. So with this Taiwanese dollars appreciating, the value of their assets, the whole industries, the value of the assets for the whole industry start to dropping. So it start to like create a kind of balance sheet imbalance now. The value of the assets still has a possibility going lower than the value of the liabilities. That is the definition of bankrupt, insolvent in some sense. So it has that impact not just on the United States, but on the rest of the world as well. So that's why people worried about that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wong.
Hi.
Always good to listen to you. So I just want to zoom back to what you mentioned earlier, right? And China's objective of investing abroad may be quite different from the US. And we know that, for example, the US invests for, well, there are many reasons, but I can summarize to two reasons. One, political reason, right? They want to buy support. A good example would be the Marshall Plan. The second one is because they want to invest in you because they want to build your export ability so that they can buy eventually. And this has normally been the story of FDI, right? Because you want to build an export capability. But for China, it's the reverse, right? It's not because they want you to export to them, they want to export to you. So they need to build your capacity to buy from them. So the question comes is the implication, right? When we look at things like the Belt and Road, does it mean number one, we can simply just freely borrow from them? Because we know that likely they're not going to claim back and say to return the initial capital given, because they actually need us to continue borrowing, right? And we see this in the way in which they invest their Belt and Road projects, right? They will try to bring their own supply chain, they're likely bring their own workers because they are effectively exporting their excess capacity. And we know that the CCP needs this because in China's history, whenever people are out of work, that's where they have social instability, regime change. Right? So they need to continue to have people working. Therefore, they need to have that capacity and export that capacity. So that's question number one, right? Freely borrow. Number two.
Is that a question or a statement? It sounds more like your statement.
Freely borrow.
All right. Okay.
You won't claim it back.
All right. Right.
Then the second part, we know that if we really borrow from them, like what you mentioned earlier, our SMEs may not, because they actually compete with us, right? So where should we direct it so that it can become effective for us and it becomes a win-win situation?
All right. Now, your first questions. It is not free indeed. It comes with cost. Even though we didn't know really the borrowing cost because it's not reviewed indeed. But based on some of the reports that I came across, so the interest rate, it's not cheap. It's in fact certainly more expensive than what you can get from Japanese government, right? So that's the reason why. So that's the reason why after Belt and Road was implemented a couple of years later, in 2016-17, you start to hear about debt-trapped stories because the projects didn't invite any return, and then it's not sustainable, and yet the host of the project has to repay the debt. So that's why I say it's not free. So therefore, it becomes like, okay, they have to like hand over the authority over the infrastructure to Chinese government. So and those usually they are strategic assets, ports, for example. So that's the reason. And as a matter of fact, after 2016, 2017, 18 onwards, you notice that more than 60% of the capital or the money lent through this BRI to those recipients, they are mainly to repay the debt they incurred before. It's not for fresh project, but as to roll over the debt. So that cannot be sustainable. So of course the CCP understand that. So they have a different approach after COVID. So they basically revamped the stuff. And you don't hear too much about BRI actually, other than in Malaysia and some of the ASEAN countries, that you didn't hear much that anymore. So that's one. So I believe, so I have therefore a line there. I say that BRI is not a multilateral institution, as in you talk about World Bank, IMF, for example. It's more like bilateral. So I don't think BRI will be sustainable, even though you have still a lot of names going out upon the name of BRI, but people just tag along with BRI. But it has nothing actually to do with BRI. In fact, so in short, I don't think it's going to last long. So somehow this BRI will be revamped further in the future. Okay. So number two, how are we going to stand more competitive or to have larger bargaining power? Now, that therefore goes back to what kind of FDI that we need. You know, what kind of trade relationship that we need. Why I mentioned about that asymmetrical trade relationship between China and Malaysia, because it is exactly that asymmetrical trade structure that will have a different power implication. Again, you imagine, why do we want to open the door that much to China? Because of the strong political bargaining there. Who benefits from the exports most to China? Like I said, those are GLCs doing palm oil and petroleum exports, and MNC as well. All right. So of course you want to keep that door open because this is where your market is. But again, once you keep the door open, it's always two ways. So then you are going to have a lot of import competitions facing local industries. All right. So plus those 90 days, so the visa-free stuff. I mean, in some sense, it sounds ridiculous because no one will visit Malaysia for 3 months non-stop. You know what I mean? So 3 days at most, 6 days at most. So in order to promote tourism, you don't need that 90 days visa-free. So, but again, you start to see that invite a lot of unlicensed, competition, for example, for across all those service sectors. So that goes back to your questions. So we have to set, for example, our goal straight. So if you really want to attract that FDI, so we are not short of FDI. So we are more capable now to impose better conditions. If you, for example, it has to be joint venture, it has to be how many percent, the supply chain must be based locally, given the next 5 years, so increase from 0 to 10 to 20%. It cannot be unconditional kind of stuff. All right. So yeah. So that's companies can do nothing, but it always goes back to the policymakers. But I doubt it, because like I said, policymakers have the ears of those GLCs, not the ordinary businessman.
Dr. Wong, as I understand it, US government public debt is about US $26 trillion. How much of it is owed to foreigners and how much is owed to the domestic savers?
You're talking about US treasuries?
Yes,
Okay.
US public debt. As you know, the savings rate in the US is very low. So how is it that domestic savers can buy more treasury bonds?
You know why I like Q&A? It shows how much I know. All right, so I know the numbers. Now, it's about 40% of US treasuries are in the hand of foreigners. All right. Out of that 40%, it used to be, in the past, about another 40+% belongs to central banks of different countries, ASEAN, Asian, for example, Japan's, China, so on and so forth. But that number has dropped to about 16% recently. So that means a majority of that foreigners own US treasuries were in the hand of private investment community, including the crypto platforms, stable coins, US financial system, so on and so forth. So it's about 40-60. Foreigners, US domestic financial systems, plus the Fed holding right there. And then out of this 40%, about 80+% in the private, 16% in the central banks of different countries. So that's more or less the ratio. Now, the ratio does matter. First of all, whether it's foreigners hold or the US institutions hold, it doesn't matter that much, in fact. Like, for example, Malaysia. what is the foreign holdings of our government bonds? It's more or less about that ratio, 40% about that, right? But because most of our government bonds, even in the foreigners' hands, they are ringgit denominated bonds. So if you look at only the ringgit denominated bonds, it's like 99, 98%. Does it matter? It matters a lot. It matters because even if the foreigners, they don't like our government bonds anymore, they want to sell it, can our government, or at least Bank Negara, can they hold it? Yeah, because it's a ringgit bond. Anytime we have ringgit to buy those bonds back. So we won't suffer the problems of sudden stop, the capital reversal, and the kind of damage that we experienced in 1997, 1998. That's pretty important. So same case goes to the United States. No matter how many percent of foreign bonds in the foreigners' hands, it's all US bonds. The Fed always has a power to print US dollars to buy them back. It always, so number one, whether it's US owned or the foreigners owned, it doesn't matter from policy management point of view. But whether it's a central bank's own or private community owns, it does matter. If the US bonds, the foreigners own bonds, if majority of them are in the hands of central banks, then the US Treasury markets will tend to be more stable. Why? Because central banks hold US dollars not for profit purpose. They don't hold treasuries today and sell tomorrow. They hold it as a buffer for their imports, to show that we have a lot of foreign reserves, so our country is very safe. So it's mainly for what we call macroprudential policy purpose. It's not for profit purpose. So like I said, they don't go in and out frequently. So that stability is important for the US Treasury markets. But private sector is very different. They hold for profit purpose, they hold for liquidity purpose, because all those flow, then you tend to see more volatility in the US Treasury yields, which is bad in some sense because too much volatility, it makes pricing very difficult. You know that all other kind of bonds pricing, it anchors at the US Treasury bonds, as a reference rate, and then on top of the US Treasuries, and then you have premiums, so on and so forth. So yeah, so that's the point. Hi.
The question which I wish to pose is regarding interest rates. High possibility of interest rates going up. The Fed has maintained rates at some times, not reducing the rates. Now with the cost going up on July 9th, issues of tariffs is supposed to be done. Suppose the cost of living in the US will go up. So will the interest rates. And if the interest rates go up, it's most likely the bonds will also go up. It's very difficult for China, Japan to create US bonds. We've got to bear the situation of banning the tariffs, because China can extend the tariffs. It's not a market for exportation. Now, how Malaysia will be able to extend interest rates be hiked? Because we are contemplating reducing the rates, so the currencies will deteriorate or depreciate. So where are we going to match in terms of cost bonds going up, view of the currency depreciating, as well as the policies, the government policies for the necessity of our cost of living. We can't afford to reduce the rates. So what is your view regarding this?
All right. I cannot tell what they have in their mind on what to do, but I can guess what they will say. Like, for example, if you listen to AG Brasilia in all this press conference of governor of AG of Bank Negara, so he used the words, we are data driven. We look at the data and then we decide what to do. So what's the data so far? That's even the case when you listen to Jerome Powell in his press release. So at this moment, they just want to see more evidence. on what to do, because tariff is something that teared apart the central bank, whether to increase or reduce interest rates. Because when you have tariff, it slows down the economy, so you need reducing interest rates. But at the same time, tariffs raise the cost. It's a supply shock, so it is going to cause prices to go up. That needs higher interest rates, so higher or lower. So that is why tariff will like I said, it tears apart decision for central bankers. So they can't pre-charge, but they have to wait for the data to appear. Like for example, in the April data, you look at the US CPI, it's about like 2.4%. It didn't go up. It stays at 2.4, which is very close to the 2% target. So I don't see any reason why the Board of Federal Reserve will want to increase the interest rate at that moment. So so that decision, I guess, will last till 2 more meetings, unless after September of July, and then I don't know, then that Trump suddenly just, the mood comes and he just like continue with the 24%, that kind of stuff. Again, story different. But at this moment, given what is going on right now, so I don't think that Powell will have any, and the board, the FOMC will have any reason to change the interest rate. So comes back to Bank Niagara's same judgment there. So should we reduce the interest rate at this moment? I don't think so, because you have SST coming over, so you probably want to see how that impact on, even though it's going to be likely one-time, one-off things on the prices, but then and plus the GDP performance, growth performance are not that bad, at least not yet. Inflation remain okay, so I think wait and see is still a better choice. So what's going on to be in the next second half? So I probably would guess that cutting interest rate, the probability of cutting interest rate is larger than maintaining the interest rate. So I probably will think one cut is a more probable event to happen. Increasing interest rates, I would say, is zero, because I don't see any reason why Malaysian inflation, CPI inflation, will go up at this moment. We don't impose tariff, so our import costs certainly will not be affected by tariff. Number one. Number two, ringgit stays strong at this moment, so it basically eases the cost of imports. So as long as you have inflation remain low, then like I said, I don't see any reason why Bank Niagara want to raise the interest rates. And even if SST expansion raise the prices, but again, central bank, they don't respond to supply shock, especially those one-time supply shock. So that's my guess at this moment. And when it talks about that exchange rate, I don't think the exchange rate comes into the picture of their decision. Bank Niagara has long, the day when exchange rate movement has been in the picture of decision making has long gone. So central bank, it probably, if the volatility of ringgit is too high, they may moderate the volatility, but they will no longer influence or try to shape the direction of the exchange rate. Otherwise, we won't have 4.8 ringgit, that kind of depreciation months ago, last year. You know what I mean? So, that's my guess on that. All right, okay. So, can we take one more questions? If anyone would like to. So two more gentlemen's questions, then we will end. No, the mic is there already. So.
Hello. Okay, I have two questions. Okay, I think Donald Trump is just going to make America great again. I think that's something to go. So what, by him doing tariffs to increase inflation in the country, all right? So I'm just wondering, how is he going to make America great again by increasing tariffs? First step. The question is, when the first time he did the tariffs, people are moving around. It's like some of the China countries who went down and then import it to US, but now it's being smart. It goes to all around the world. And then the first country would say, hey, can you roll down the tariffs? I don't get it. So if you are operating in SME now, how do you operate? Do you want to bear the thing in 4 years? Will that do everyone to do? Then it becomes over, then back to normal. Because I agree with you, I think we are moving into a new world order that gives us this is free trading, alright? We won't be able to go with the last one anymore. And the last question what I have is, we as an individual, how can we capitalize in this whole tariff thing going on? You know, with goods going up, what can we do? Can we invest in gold, or what can we do to take that and capitalize before the tariff thing going on?
Okay. So let me respond to you 3 questions, right? A quick one. Number 1, this MAGA movement, we can no longer use economic logic to think about his policy. Otherwise, we will never understand why. Keep asking why. So we don't use economic logic to understand anymore, even though we can use economic reasoning to understand the impact, the consequence, but never the logic. The answer is number 1. Number 2, I also talk to my different audience in different occasions that don't use the lens of US trade, US-China tension, or geopolitical conflict as the framework, because this tariff is no longer to contain the rise of China anymore. It's not about China as it did in 2018, 2019. And Trump is not Biden. Biden tend to use ideological lens to see this thing, so it's like democracy versus autocracy. But Trump is not, all right? So then we don't use that lens anymore. So therefore, this whole MAGA movement, or Make America Great Again, so which means what? My answer to your first question is that tariff, even though it's an instrument to deal with the foreigners, foreign countries, but it is actually based or originated in domestic politics. So that Make America Great Again is to serve his base, his movement. You will never know how the MAGA people like what he did or what he has been doing, not just did, but what he has been doing. The rhetoric of bringing the jobs back, that America will not suffer anymore from helping others unnecessarily. So that kind of rhetoric served his base very well. So all these things, they are more toward the need of domestic politics. So if you want to know how that direction of a tariff is going to change, going to end, so two things. Number 1, see how the domestic politics in the United States evolve. Number 2, look at the economic consequence. That 2 things will make you have better, or us to have better understandings on how these tariff things are going to evolve. Number 1. Number 2, that when we try to how to take advantage of tariff differences across our ASEAN countries, so that the others higher, Indonesia higher, Vietnam higher, we are lower, so we can try FDI. That's what I tried to say just now, that ASEAN, even though we like to tell ourselves as a group, the 4th largest economies in the world, most dynamic, the youngest population in the world, blah, blah, blah. But we tend to compete among each other, compete against FDI, which therefore will make ASEAN never truly a group facing the external pressure. So that kind of rhetoric will keep going. But again, I don't think that that's the benefit that we're supposed to leverage, because people come to Malaysia not because of that. People are more willing to invest in Malaysia because of the ecosystem, the supply chains that we have right here, rather than anything else. So how to broaden the supply chain across strategic industries will be the important reason to keep FDI coming in, because they always want to stay next to their suppliers, even next to their competitors, so that they can get the best talents from their competitors. You know what I mean? So we need that ecosystem or supply chain around us. Last one, what can we do as an individual? Tackle trade, right? So now you know that whenever Trump says something bad, sounds severe, asset prices drop, that's the time you should like go in. And more severe it is, you buy more, and then because always he will make a U-turn. Well, that's not investment advice, right? So that's what people talk about, that tyco trade. Trump's always chicken out first, that kind of stuff. But that's a problem. But because Trump's now hate people accusing him taco, so he may go more crazier to show that I am not chickening out. And that actually will make the world more dangerous. So the Iranian events right now is exactly kind of showing this. Yeah.
So I have two questions. My first question is, given that just now your previous slide, right? So we have the history chart. Whenever the tariff is up, then you aftermath is with the recession of a Great Depression. So same what is going to happen at this moment. So what will be different compared to the previous? So this is my first question. My second question will be, if you have the year of President Trump and the year of Xi Jinping, and the last one, the year of our dear Prime Minister, what will be your advice to them? Thank you.
Oh, that's a tough question. All right. So let me go to the easy one. Well, once tariff was there, it is very difficult to take it out because you always have beneficiaries of tariff. Because tariff always sounds protectionist. So when you have industries being protected because of tariff, they always will, be the interest, to bargain for keeping that tariff. So that's why 2018, 2019, when tariff was there, it was there still until today. So unless that tariff, so you are right to say that that kind of U-turn always happened only when economic recessions took place. The Great Depression will be the best stories to tell. All right. So that, which means what? Which means, like I respond to one of the audiences now. Two logics. One, look at the domestic politics, how they evolve. Number two, look at the economic impact. So if we don't see any, big severe damage being done, I can almost guarantee you that the tariff will always be there. Unless that the world enter recession or bad things happen in the United States. Only then it has a chance or enough voices in the Congress, for example, to have a different say. Otherwise, it will be there. Okay. Now, if I have the years of these three great men, well, I don't know what to talk to Trump, because to be able to talk to Trump, you must be a good bodek. I'm not bodek good enough to bodek people. But I can tell what they want to do, more or less. So Trump, in fact, he will have that tendency to make himself to be seen as a great man, as Putin, as Xi Jinping. So then, which means what? Which means I don't believe that or America under his leadership will have that kind of conflict with China as we used to know in the past couple of years. Because to be able to clash with China, that must be because you have ideological clash. You don't like the autocratic government, you are democracy, right? So, but then, like I said, it is not a concern of Trump at all. So if you didn't put ideology first, but the interest first, but your admiration towards a great man first, then I believe that the US-China, the kind of clash that we used to know, will be different. And the dynamics will be different in the next couple of years. Okay, so any intention, so then I will talk to prime ministers. Any intention that you want to manipulate upon that clash or conflict tensions that you want to take advantage, then you probably can have a second thought. So because we used to benefit from all these FDI, data center, blah, blah, whatever it is, because of that clash in the past 2 years. So I don't believe that again, those years probably already leave us away. So that's what I would tell PMX. And then Xi Jinping, you cannot tell him anything, I believe, because he has, again, a thought that unless you tell what he wants to listen, otherwise I would be disappeared. I don't want to. But I believe that his ambition to make United States decoupled in the sense that all those choke points that in terms of financial systems, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of chips, that used to be able to hold back Chinese power or development will tend to be his goal as far as he's still in the power. How to minimize those fragility. So that is something that he will never, no matter what you say, he will never change. So that's what so which means the policy, how you want to see Chinese when it comes to the negotiation table, what they call the table, with the Trump's teams, or how he treat his neighboring countries, other partner countries. So this shall be the core of understanding. From there, then we try to understand what the policy they're trying to pursue. Yeah. Okay, so with that, then I shall end. It's 2 o'clock, so thank you very much for your time and staying with me. Thank you.